Welcome everyone, and thank you for clicking on my video. I just wanted to warn you, this is not my best work. The filming process took a long time and I started rushing towards the end. There are also a lot of parts I did not film or did not frame properly. However, I still am very proud of this coat and hope you all enjoy. Thank you. This is the plan, here we go, for my coat. Just a simple puff coat that you see at the store and stuff all the time, but this one's just going to be made a little bit to my length. It's going to have a nice little fur hood and 2 pockets up front. I'm still debating on whether I want to add a front area that snaps up front, which I think I will because I want this coat to last a little longer, and it would be nice if the zipper doesn't get very cold. Here are the pieces drawn out. It's just a rough draft. So just 2 basic front pieces. This has to be 26 inches, probably a little longer because the zipper I have is 26 inches. The 1 back piece, going to be 2 arm pieces and 1 piece down the center of the hood, 2 side pieces, and then the front of the hood is going to extend more and be the fur part. Alright, so this is what I have so far. So this is the hood. It looks like I made my measurements pretty well. I did the top, the front and the back, and the armholes lined up pretty nicely. I didn't really have to make too many adjustments. I drew this line down the side and where I want to pocket. So this side I'm going to cut out as the 2 front pieces, add 1/2 inch seam allowances to this piece when I cut it out of the regular fabric, and then mark where I want the pockets to begin and end, and that's where I want to make the pockets. So the front and back, the front pieces are going to be cut separately. This one's going to be cut on this line and marked out, and this one is going to be just the whole piece, and the lining piece is going to be this same piece, but where I have the original line, instead of it bringing it out 1.5 inches like I brought for the front piece for the main part of the fabric, the lining is only going to be brought out 1/2 inch, so that on the main piece of the fabric, when I fold it over on this line to put the zipper, then the lining piece would meet up in the same place, and I'll have more lining fabric to work with to just make that end really pretty. Most likely I'm probably going to have to sew that down by hand. The back is all pretty simple, pretty self-explanatory. I just need it to be a winter coat that keeps me warm. It's not supposed to look super pretty. So for the collar, what I did was I took basically not a collar, the hood. I took basically a hood that I liked the fit of. I measured how high it was, and then I just measured this neck and kind of followed this pattern to see where I'm going to fit it. And I really just kind of eyeballed it. I'm putting this on. And like that. And since it's going to be a puff fabric, I did a 1/2 piece, and then we're going to put a 4-inch piece in the middle. So when I measured this neck piece, I took out 4 inches of the back so that I knew how much was left for each side, and cut that in half. Or you could just do you measure the whole neck, cut that in half, subtract 2. That's how you know how long this side needs to be. And then I added 1/2 inch seam allowance. As you see here, I didn't add enough seam allowance, so I just got to add a little bit more on the main piece. There's just why we do a mock-up. So now I'm going to take apart all these seams and cut this piece down here, take apart these seams, and start putting it on my outer fabric, my shell fabric, and my lining fabric, and just cut all those out. And probably tomorrow I'm going to work on actually sewing it together. So I have all the pieces cut out now. And if you're wondering, why am I not at the table? It's because my parents have like a whole paint setup at the table where I usually work. And they haven't painted in like over a week, but they haven't put up on the stuff. So I can't work at the table, so I'm working on the floor of my room. So I have all the lining pieces cut out. Most of the pieces for the lining, most of the muslin I used for the lining were the same that I used for the shell. Only difference is I made some pockets. I kind of just freehanded those for the opening. And then this inside front piece. I did one big piece for the front of the lining. The pocket's going to be underneath, obviously. And then, well, and then for the shell, it's basically the same pieces, of course flipped around. It's these pieces are going to be, it's two separate pieces that are going to be combined, and we're going to add the pocket in this piece. Now a lot of people use this to bring it in another area to kind of like cinch the waist in a little bit. I'm not doing that. I'm just doing that so I can just have an easier time placing the pocket. So all of my pieces are cut out. As you saw with the fur, or faux fur really. I just cut out, it's going to be 4 plus ½ inch seam allowance on each side, so it's a 5-inch strip. And 30 inches go all the way around, plus ½ inch on each side, so 31 inches. That's going to go around, and it's just going to hang freely outside of the hood. So that's pretty. I'm going to start sewing tomorrow because I have a lot of other stuff to do for school, and I'm just tired. It took me forever to get here, and it's really cold outside, so I do need this coat, but I'm tired, so that's probably all I'm doing today. So I figured out the order that I'm going to construct this coat. I've seen different ways of putting the coats together. So what I'm going to do is do the outside piece minus the hood, the lining minus the hood separately. Then I'm going to combine those two pieces by combining them at the cuffs, and then sewing the zipper, machine sewing the zipper to the shell, and then hand sewing the zipper to the lining, and then doing something similar for the bottom. And then what I'm going to do is add the hood. So I'm going to close it up on the lining of the hood. That's going to be the last part I do of that. The hood is going to basically be constructed separately from the body, and then at the very end add those together. And then there's a stitch, which I have to look up again, of sewing the lining of a hood, the lining of a coat to the back of the coat where you can't see it on the other side, but just to make sure that it's secure and it's not this like big gap moving around. That is the plan. It shouldn't take too long because I have all the pieces cut out. The first step I'm going to do, which I'm probably going to restate, is adding the pockets to the front pieces and then sewing the front pieces together. Then from there I do my usual sewing construction method of sewing any type of top that I do, which is shoulder seams, sleeves added on, and then sewing from the armpits down and the armpits down the sleeves. We're going to do the same for the lining, except of course we don't have two pieces to add together for the fronts of the lining. We're just going to have that one piece, and we also don't have pocket pieces. We're going to work on attaching the pockets to the front. Now I had an original method and it was just going to be chaos, and I only want to sew this once. So what I did was I have my outer shell pieces. I have this here, and I have, this is the inside. This is the outer shell closer to my side, and this is the inner shell, which is where the zipper is going to go right here. I have these two pieces here. Dang, you can't even see the marks. I got it the wrong way. So you can't see them, but I have marks here, where here and on this piece and here, where I've lined it up and I fitted on me when I had on the muslin mock-up, and I marked where I would like the pocket to go comfortably. When I marked it, I made a line that was completely across the line the curve that I made. That way that they would line up on both pieces. So what I did was I was going to originally line up the pocket piece on this one and on this one separately and pin them down, but instead what works better, and to make sure that all the pieces have the pocket where it's supposed to be, is I pin the pocket to one, and then in order to pin the pocket to the other, what I did was take another pocket piece, put it right side up, and then put this right side down right over top of this piece so that they would line up, and just line the bottoms up. See how it fits nicely on top of the other pocket piece? That way I know that when I sew these together and then I flip it back out and sew the two front pieces together, that the pockets will line up perfectly. So, I guess to demonstrate that again. So it's going to be more difficult to do it on this piece. So what I'm going to do is line it up on this one. Let's move this out the way. So we have the back piece here, and we're going to take the front pieces and we're going to sew them at the top. So I'm going to do straight stitch, and I think I'm probably just going to reinforce with a zigzag stitch, and then we're going to attach the sleeves on, and I'll just show y'all how that looks when that's done. And then I'll move on to the next step. So I just realized it wasn't recording. So what I'm going to do is sew the sleeves down from the armpits down, and I'm just lining everything up, and then we're going to sew the sides from the armpits down, do a straight stitch followed by a zigzag stitch. We're just going to do this for the side, same thing for both sides, and then we're going to move on to work on the hood. So we're going to work on the shell part for the hood. I did the exact same thing when I worked on the lining for the hood. So with the shell part, this middle part, I already have the dimensions. I think it's supposed to be about 4 or 5 inches here. And then it's supposed to be 30 inches, but I added on just a longer strip, probably a few more inches. And I did that so that these lines here could match up more. So you see how it just goes like that? I did that so that you see here it goes a little longer than the bottom, and then here it goes a little longer than the top. I just did that so that these lines at the bottom part can just match up. So it could be one continuous line all the way across. The inside, you know, I make a lot of mistakes. I just made a mistake. I didn't put right sides together. I put one side was gray and the other side was black. And I noticed before I started sewing, because that would have been frustrating, would have added on time because I'm in a time crunch today. But yeah, so we're just going to sew around here. And then we're going to finish the hood completely, which means add the fur and add the lining to it. And I'm going to add the hood on last. That's going to be my finishing part for the whole coat. So let's get to sewing. I want to sew around the curve. Oh, this is because when I was putting a pin in, it went right into my finger. I was not paying attention. That's why you shouldn't sew in a rush. But I plan to get to a certain point before I start studying for my test, and I have to go somewhere. I'm going to a drag show. Now we have the fur. I'm going to flip it inside out. I'm going to try to push back as much as the fur inside of it, but I've never really sewn with fur before, so this is going to be a new experience. So I marked the center of the lining, the shell, and the fur. What I'm going to do is put right sides together of the lining, the shell, and then the fur is going to go in between both. And we're just going to pin it all the way around. Here I'm just measuring 1 inch in on the center front of the shell and ironing it down to make the zipper installation process much easier. The army green fabric is just a cotton fabric that I'm using so that I don't iron directly onto the puffy fabric. I'm going to repeat this process for the lining, but only ironing in 1/2 inch of that fabric. The zipper is going to be machine sewn onto the shell, and then the lining will be hand sewn to the opposite side of the zipper later. So you can see on this part, you have to be very careful with this. I pinned the armholes to the shell and the lining together, right sides together, and we're just going to sew them all the way around. The way you put them together also is very important. So the front also matches up with the front, so when then I flip it right side out, it'll all match together and go nicely. I've also already sewn on the zipper. It's a little bit off, just like a tiny bit, so that you can see that the lines are off, but on the inside the lines are matched up, and on the outside the lines are slightly off. Okay, whatever, I guess. So make sure like nothing's twisted around. Make sure like, okay. Okay, so then we're just going to do straight stitch followed by zigzag stitch all the way around both sides. And then I'm going to turn it inside out to where the lining's on the outside so that I can sew the lining to the zipper. I'm going to do that by hand and then sew the bottom part of this. I'm probably going to iron it up like this and then sew the bottom part to the lining. And basically the whole body piece will be finished. All right, so I turned the sleeves right side out, and earlier, I don't know if I said this, but I probably did, but I cut off 1/2 inch of the sleeves, the lining, and kept the outside the same so that this lining will sit a little bit inside, a little more inside of the, yeah, so when you line up the seams, the outside, the shell comes in. That way on the outside you don't see the lining. So I just thought about something I was going to do. I didn't want to hand sew that much of this. I'm already going to have to hand sew to close up the hole, and I'm going to have to hand sew this. And I was going to, the original plan was to hand sew the bottom, but what I think I'll do is turn this back out again, cut out probably another 1/2 inch off of here, pin this and sew that together as well, and then turn it back, and then all I'll have to do is sew this by hand up the zipper, and then we're going to add the hood. Alright, so we're almost finished and I'm excited. It's late, but I have to finish. I plan on wearing this tomorrow. So for the lining attachment to the hood, I did by hand. I did basically an invisible stitch method that you would do with 2 pieces of fabric like laying like this, but instead I took like a little piece from the lining, about, I don't know, 1 centimeter, and then I would just take 1 thread from the zipper and I just go back and forth like that. I didn't use one continuous length of thread, I just used part, so just in case something happens and it gets ripped, I don't have to redo the whole thing. And this method of just taking 1 thread from the zipper leaves it where you don't see anything on this side. You don't see any of the lining thread. So the thread I used just matched the lining instead of using like a black thread, which you could use a thread that matched the shell if you like. So now I'm going to machine sew the last part, and what I'll do is I take the body piece and then I'll take the hood piece and we're just going to line it up. So this is how I attach the hood lining to the body lining, which is which means I would have the rest of the project done by this point. This was the last thing I did on this coat. So I didn't film me actually doing it because I was in a Kroger parking lot when I did it, because it was very, very cold outside. I wanted to wear the coat because that's the only technical coat I have. It's a very light coat, but it's the only coat I have. I wanted to wear the coat, but I was meeting someone somewhere and I had to be there by a certain time, and this was the last thing I had to do. So I didn't need my machine for anything. So I was like, well, I can hand sew it in the car. I used a matching thread to the fabric, but I'm going to use this black thread to hopefully that you all can see a little better. So what I did was I went in about 1/2 inch. If you need something to help you mark it, then do that, but I usually just eyeball it. So I do 1/2 inch on one piece. It doesn't matter which piece you start on, and then 1/2 inch up on the other piece, and then you just go through about, I'd say maybe a centimeter, maybe 1/2 centimeter. And then do the same thing about the same distance away on the other piece. So I think this is called a blind stitch. It's used to close up a lot of things. A lot of people use them on, say, pillows, just a lot garments, just anything that has to be closed fully around. And you do most of the closure part with the machine, and then you finish it off with a little bit of stitching. Now for me, I did the whole piece as this hand stitching method and closed it up, while otherwise I probably would have done it mostly by machine and then got it to a place where I can turn it right side out and then did it by hand. But the reason I did that is because if I do want to make any changes or adjustments to the coat, I will go in through the hood and the lining, the hood and the body lining piece. That's where I'm going to go in. So you see I went back and forth a little bit, and then every so often I'll just pull the thread close, straighten that up, and you can tell that you can't see any stitches that I made. Ooh, that's some on the carpet. So right here you can tell that there are no stitches. Now there's a little bit of bunching, so what I do for that is I just pull it a little more, and there we go. And then it's closed. So this is the final product, everyone. Let's give it a nice little spin. And then I'm going to do a spin with the hood up. Oops. So this hood, putting the fur on the hood, was an excellent idea. I'm so glad I did that. I've worn this a couple times already. I wore it, I was out the night that was very cold. We're doing a lot of social distance things, so we were outside a lot. It was very cold. This hood kept this nice heat around my head, and it was great. Right now, you're also getting warm with this coat. It is a very thin coat, but I went from no coat. So it still was really good. The temperature was down in the teens, and this coat still kept me nice and warm. A few things I would change is I wouldn't do this type of zipper. This zipper, it's like a double-sided zipper. So it's always hard for me to get it going at the beginning. But you can see it also zips that way too. So it's difficult for me to get it going at the beginning. Not a super big deal. I would put the pockets a little bit back, probably like 1 inch or 2 further towards my back, just so I have more room in my pockets. The actual pocket size is big enough, but when you put your hands in it, it's just not quite the same. I also may add a zipper, not add a zipper, but if I were to make this again, I would put a zipper here. I see a lot of people have coats where they have a zipper there. Still not a big deal. I like how the lining shows a little bit on the outside of the pocket, and it's like an accent kind of. I would make the sleeves a little bit wider so that my hand kind of sometimes gets a little bit stuck when I'm taking it off or putting it on, and just a little bit. I just need a little bit of leeway. But that is about it. I thought I was gonna add like another collar. I thought I would like a closure piece for it, but putting the hood up, it just does its job. So I do really like it. I recommend everyone, if you are a seamstress or if you just like sewing, I recommend just try to make a coat really quickly. This coat material, the puffy material, I think I've said it earlier, it was already done like this. But you can make your own. You see a fabric that you like and you get some batting. I would suggest get probably a thicker batting because this is probably the thinnest batting they have. But you go get some batting and you just make your own. Thank you for watching. If you made it this far, thank you for getting this far in the video. I really do appreciate it. Please subscribe. Please like the video if you like it. And if you want to see more that I'm working on throughout the week and possibly other projects that I'm working on, please follow me on Instagram at shortskirts_store. Thank you.